Hello and welcome to Composely's latest webinar on Speaking CEO, how to make the business case for content. I'm Nicole MacLean, our head of growth marketing here, and really excited to dive into some hopefully practical use cases and examples and leave you all with some templates that you can help make the business case for your content. Few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on mute, so please use the chat, use the Q&A. I'll do my best to keep an eye on both of those, and we'll try to leave some time for questions at the end. We are recording today's session, so don't take too many notes. You will get a copy of the recording, this slide deck, as well as all of the templates that we talk about. And then obviously I am working from home. So just bear with me if for some reason a fire alarm goes off or crazy internet things. Hang tight, we will troubleshoot and get back as soon as possible. But with that, let's jump in. So first I have a quick poll that I'm going to launch here. And I'm just always curious, first, how often do you meet with your financial leader? That could be a CFO, a controller, a VP of finance. If you're in a smaller organization, that might mean that you're working with your CEO as your financial leader. But curious, kind of what's the cadence and how often are you talking to them? And then second, I am also curious, many things have changed since January of 2023. So curious, have you guys been adjusting your goals? Are you holding steady? Have you been asked if you're allowed to change your goals, or are you being held to the original forecast that you maybe came up with as we headed into the new year? I'll give you all about another 20 seconds to answer, and then I'll share the answers with everyone. Good news is it does sound like a fair number of you have either chosen to or been allowed to update goals this year, which I'm happy to see for many of you. All right, let's see. So definitely more never than I would like to see, and we'll talk about that. But very much a mix on how frequently we are currently talking to finance. Not surprised to see as needed be the answer. That is what I hear most of the time. And then adjusting goals does look about 75% of you have adjusted as you've needed, and about 25% are staying the course. The follow-up, if you are one of the 25%, is that because you're on target and you're hitting the goals no problem? Or is it because you just haven't had an opportunity to forecast? If you feel comfortable, follow up with that in the chat. Fantastic. So to get into what we're going to cover, like I said, we have 25 minutes at this point. So really most of what I'd love to spend our time today is really going through a use case that I put together, and we can actually kind of walk through a real life example. But first, do you want to just kind of start with making sure that we're speaking the language? What are some pitfalls that maybe marketers, when they go in to talk to finance leaders and CEOs, tend to make? How to arm yourself with some go-to metrics so that you're ready to have those conversations at any point in time. Then we're going to dive into a use case, walk through how to use some of these templates in practice, walk away with some takeaways, and of course, time for questions if you guys have any. So first and foremost, what are some common mishaps that marketers tend to make when working with our CEOs and our CFOs? I think first and foremost is one, you don't talk to them, or you don't talk to them about some of these more higher level discussions like budget, resourcing, understanding the financial model, understanding the P&L, the income statement and balance sheet and all that good stuff. And you're not having that strategic level of conversation, either as a content leader or a marketing leader. If you don't have that visibility, it is hard to make a really compelling case for anything you do in marketing, let alone content. So if you don't have a standard meeting to talk about that, definitely first takeaway, I would recommend the cadence should really be at the pace of your business. I'll say for myself, a lot of times what works well is a monthly review, like a monthly one-on-one where we're looking at the BVA. Obviously, I'm leading the full marketing function, so have visibility into everything. But as a content leader, specifically looking at content, should be meeting with your head of marketing or your leadership team to kind of understand, at least on a monthly or quarterly cadence, are you tracking to goal? Are you using your resources effectively? Are you planning out enough so that if you have some aggressive growth goals, you're planning content and resourcing that you'll need. We'll talk a little bit about how to think about resourcing actually in the use case. But yeah, it's really important. Marketing has the largest discretionary budget in most organizations outside of headcount and people. So making sure you know how to use that and talk about it is important. I think the other mishap is marketers will come to the table with marketing data like MQLs and leads and SQLs and opportunities and squirrels and all of the marketing alphabet soup that we use in day-to-day. And those things are very important. And it is important to see how content and any marketing function is leading and driving a lot of those predicting indicators. But at the core of what most CEOs and CFOs care about is revenue and how our MQLs and our marketing funnel is driving actual revenue on paper, contracted and booked. So making sure you are looking at it with a little bit more holistic. And so understanding things like your customer acquisition cost, looking at your payback period, your lifetime value, your gross margin, and your revenue numbers are all really important. I have a slide. So if I'm throwing out things you're not familiar with, don't worry, I've got you. This one might be a little controversial. Again, I think it depends on your business, but the third mishap I see a lot is overly leading with marketing influenced revenue and less source revenue. That's a big statement. Source revenue is always the most clean-cut, easiest thing to talk about. Content is one of those things that sourced revenue is really hard to tie to, because very rarely is content sourcing. Most of the time your content is influencing, or if it did source it, it can be hard to attribute it. So oftentimes we lean more on, well, here's how content is influencing revenue. And don't get me wrong, that's super important and you do want to understand that. But if that is what you are leading with to someone like a CEO or a CFO, it will oftentimes not be met how you want it to. And so walking and presenting that balance is really important to understand, and looking for more direct ways to show the impact of content is going to be really important. And then lastly, and we'll talk about this in the use case, is that you only focus on your program spend and you're not thinking about the marketing spend of your content in a holistic way. So the program spend is important, but a lot of times in content, there's vendors, third-party, in-house resourcing, and you want to make sure that you are taking into consideration the full investment that the company's making. One, you're going to get a lot more respect because the CFO will know that you are thinking the way they think. And there's a lot of things that go into it. And so as you're going through a lot of these data points, thinking about it's not just the salary to hire an in-house writer or an in-house designer. You also sometimes have to pay the insurance fees and fringe benefits, a lot of times what it's called. There are delivery costs. So if you are able to secure that contract, the cost to deliver, the cost of the sales commission, on top of how much you just spent on a program to get that lead through the door. So if you come with it, really thinking about it holistically, a lot of times that helps you immediately already get on a closer to the same page as a finance and executive leader. So with that, not going to spend too much time going deep into these slides. Like I said, you will get a copy of this. And so these are some really common metrics that I know I've used with finance leaders. And it's really great to have a good understanding of this for the business and use it as you think about resourcing and making cases for why you need certain resources. There's also a great article that I've linked here that you'll have access to by Tim Kopp. Tim Kopp is the former CMO of ExactTarget, also worked in Procter & Gamble, and he has a whole blog back from when he transitioned from CMO into the VC world. And one of the things that made him really successful was that he also had a finance degree. So he was always working incredibly closely with the finance leader. So he has some really good resources. So if these are not your thing, if you're a little new to it, highly recommend that you check out some of his content. The other thing, so that's really kind of a lot of the metrics that you're going to want to talk to on the finance side, larger metrics for the business. On your side, it is really understanding the funnel, and it's not just the marketing funnel. It's truly from acquiring that lead to how you're moving them through the funnel as efficiently as possible. You know, one of the best things that you can talk about with content is a lot of times you may not, sometimes you can use something like an ebook or a gated piece of content or a podcast or a webinar to do lead capture, put them in the funnel. Normally there's something else that got them to that point. But the best thing you can look at, and we'll kind of talk through in some of the templates, is how do the funnel metrics change based on activities leads take through the funnel? So one thing that you can use to make a really compelling case is that if someone in the funnel is interacting with your content and is moving through with greater efficiency, that's an excellent reason to make an investment. Real life example, in a past company, we did an analysis and found that every single customer we had attended at least 2 webinars, I believe, and most had attended 3 or more, but not all. And so that was a really interesting data point to use to say, okay, if almost all of our customers are coming to webinars and many are coming to more than one before they become a customer, then that is a great tactic to use to help convert your database. And so as soon as we found that out, we said, okay, let's go find everyone in our database that has not yet attended at least 3 webinars. And let's make sure that we are coming up with a more aggressive webinar strategy in order to convert those people, because we now have the data that shows they are converting into customers. That did require some additional resources, needed to deprioritize some other types of content in order to prioritize webinars. But as soon as we presented that argument, absolutely no pushback. Everyone was incredibly supportive. Suddenly you were getting more support from sales and driving people to those webinars, customer success recommending customers to be on those webinars. And so by bringing that data point, it was able to bring the whole company together around that strategy. So I did put together this marketing metric benchmark for you guys. You'll get a link to it. It doesn't have to be this, but I would recommend that you have some sort of funnel metric data sheet that you are updating quarterly that can be as channel specific or blended as possible. But if you can understand your costs throughout the funnel, your conversion rates throughout the funnel, and how much you're spending to acquire those folks, the average contract value, and does that differ across different channels? Does the sales cycle differ across different channels? And come up with this. These are typically the main metrics you need to build a compelling business case for whatever you need to do. And if you have them built out in a lot of times, you know, for us, we use HubSpot as our system of record. In order to build this, I'm pulling a lot of data out of HubSpot. But what's nice about having it in a spreadsheet versus always having to go back to HubSpot to get it is that I can run really quick forecasting. I can model different things really quickly if I have this all built out. So for example, you know, in this case, I'm going to focus a little more on using conversion metrics. So built out some industry standards. But there are some benchmarks you can use. Honestly, the cost per whatever is just taking the number of whatever you have divided by your spend to get there. But having all of this is going to be really important. And then whenever you want to do something, you don't have to go spend hours trying to find the data. If you have this and keep it up quarterly, you're going to be able to start building business cases and speak more data-driven a lot faster. Again, I pulled a lot of this out of HubSpot. Depending on the channel, like organic, you may want to add a conversion rate for traffic to lead conversion, in which case you're also going to pull that out of Google Analytics. Quick point, if you have not transitioned from GA Universal to GA4, don't forget you have like 30 days to do it. We're dealing with that right now as well. But don't forget, you need to switch it over. So this is my recommendation on kind of having everything at the ready so that you can build the business case as you need to go. I'm going to pause as a reminder. Drop in any questions. I'll try and keep an eye on them. I know we went through kind of a lot of data information. But what I would love to spend the rest of the time that we have together is diving into, okay, that's great. You have a spreadsheet. I understand what all of these acronyms mean, but how do I actually apply it? So I put together a quick use case around how to think through resourcing and asking for budget, looking at organic content. Some of that is because currently, this is a lot of what we do with Composely. So we work with a lot of marketers where this is their reality. So I feel pretty confident in knowing that this works because I've seen it. But there are a lot of ways that this can apply to webinars, podcast, gated pieces of content, videos, especially now. I think videos, podcasts are going to become really interesting in your marketing mix. So you can kind of replace organic content with that, and it still hopefully should play out for you. So lots of text on this. High level, this is Chelsea, who's leading marketing for a 100-person finance company. She's really looking for some more dependable, repeatable demand gen channels. Organic is one she's looking at because, as we know, it's an owned channel. There are lots of changes in organic and search and all of that good stuff that we could probably have 10 other webinars on. But for now, we're kind of really just focusing on, if this is a channel she's chosen, how do I make a business case for it? So first, her company gets about 2,000 organic web views a month, but they don't have consistent scheduling. They're not doing a ton of keyword optimization. And without the focus, this tends to get deprioritized. So 2,000 is currently their benchmark. So everything we pull for benchmark, part of what you can look at is, while you may have a benchmark, in this case, we're going to make some assumptions that if we put a more thorough, diligent, prioritized strategy in place that might require some resourcing, we can actually find efficiency in those metrics. That is where you get better and better at knowing how to forecast those, the more you do this and the more you see things work or not work. Or trying to find data or research from other companies that are doing this, or benchmark reportings that can help bring some credibility to the business case. And you'll kind of see that as we jump into the example. The other thing is that she's pulling keyword research and competitive research to get a sense on, is this a realistic strategy? So based on their keyword research, it does look like they have an opportunity to rank for some high intent keywords that don't have a super high difficulty, which means she's being realistic at what she's looking to achieve. But a lot of their competitors are putting out more content than she is. So the key is that they need to increase their content production and create that consistency in order to have a shot at, increasing that repeatable demand by increasing their rankings. So in this case, after evaluating various solutions, Chelsea is going to work with a third-party vendor with specific industry experience for finance. However, this was not part of the original budget. So we're going to walk through kind of how to build out the metrics, what that email to that CEO or CFO might look like, and hopefully she will get the budget she needs. So jumping into the example, if you have this kind of benchmark baseline, then you can pull a lot of these into formulas and kind of start testing and looking at what's realistic, what's not. Many times I have done this and realized that what I thought was going to be super efficient, or we were going to be able to pay back or get ROI very quickly, when you actually look at some of the conversions, I'm like, no, this is going to take way longer. This might not actually be the best plan. I don't need to make a use case for this. Or I can look at it and be like, wow, this is a no-brainer. We're going to make the ROI. We're going to get the payback really quickly, and it's going to help us hit our goals. We should absolutely do this. So it's even helped me kind of gut check before I even go in to make an ask. So in this case, built out, this would be what I ultimately send to CEO, CFO, to basically think of it as like the appendix, so that if they want to really dig into where I'm coming from, the assumptions, everything's laid out. So first, I always like to list what the assumptions are so that finance person and I are on the same page to jump. And if something seems off, we can always then have a really productive discussion about the assumptions. And because everything is formula based, you can go in and change it really quickly and see if it still makes sense to move forward. And so highly recommend laying out these assumptions. In this case, marketing team average salary, 80,000. This would be something that you'd probably pull from Google Analytics. Like, what is your traffic to lead conversion? So again, that might be something you want to add here as like almost pre-funnel, is what is your traffic to lead conversion rate? And then here you can see where I'm saying I'm going to model better conversion rates based on the strategy of going after better keywords, posting more consistently, having content written by someone with industry expertise. Hopefully it's going to resonate better. And that is totally fair, that while you're using the benchmark, you also are trying to look at ways that you're getting better, because this is something that CFOs always love to think about is, okay, let's not just keep the status quo, but how are you consistently trying to get better and better and more efficient over time? In this case, part of why I wanted to use this is because it's a great example of looking at the cost of a program very holistically, specifically looking at resources. Oftentimes, there's not a ton of program spend, like you're not paying a third party, you're not paying Google to run ads in order to do organic content. Most of the time, the cost is coming from producing the content and managing it and optimizing it and all of that good stuff. And so most of the time, there's kind of a couple ways you can look at outsource vendors at various costs or hiring in-house. And so what I've modeled here is kind of looking at like a lower or kind of more mid-quality third-party vendor or freelancer, maybe a little bit more higher quality, or someone that has that industry expertise that they're bringing as a kind of premium service, and the in-house writer cost. And then you kind of pull out all of the various things. And this is really showing that holistic approach to modeling how much investment is the company actually making and what is the perceived benefit. So for the third party, it's very easy because you just look at the invoice amount. As you look at your internal processes, though, that's where you kind of really want to think about all of the costs, including time. And so that's part of where I have that marketing team member salary here, is because if you think about it, most of the time you need editing. So if you're going to use a third party, there's always going to be someone who has to manage that vendor, maybe provide some final like eyes before it goes live. And so you want to take that into consideration, because I think a lot of times people miss that when you're working with third party is, oh, cool, that's the benefit of working with third party is now I don't have to do that internally. There's always some cost associated to managing a third party vendor, but that cost might look different based on how much they're actually doing for you. And then of course you have the in-house writer, which is an average salary of 60K. Again, I pulled this from like the labor market, the US labor website. So that's a very credible place that you can link back and show that to your leadership. And then you also don't want to forget fringe benefits, because if they're in-house, you typically have like tech stipends, 401k matches, insurance, stuff like that that you want to think about. It is different for every company. Benchmark, take 15% of the salary, and that's the extra amount that you want to make sure you model in. And so then with that, you look at the yearly cost. And then what I created is just kind of a forecast of what I think is going to happen based on each one of the options I could choose. And again, you're making some assumptions here. You're taking some educated guesses. The thought is typically an in-house writer is going to know your tone really well, but they can get distracted with meetings. That's not all they do. They're probably going to get asks for other things. So you probably would get some really good quality and be able to produce more potentially. I mean, it really depends. And that's what you have to kind of model out is what they're going to get done. It might be more than an outsourced resource. It might be less. But again, you kind of have to figure that out for yourself. Modeling different options, especially like I've done this looking at a chat tool, for example. Big fan of Drift, but Drift is kind of the premium option. But there are a lot of things that save me time working with Drift compared to a cheaper chat tool. where you have to do a lot more manual work to automate it, build workflows, etc. That's a kind of another example of like the lower quality that on paper is cheaper, but then if you also, replace internal editing with internal time management of the tool, I know I had to put less time into managing Drift than I have to put into managing the free HubSpot chat tool, for example. So that needs to be taken into consideration. And then you apply kind of the modeling of what you think you're going to get out of it. Can I get X number of more leads, X increase in my conversion rates? In this case, I just modeled the conversion rate of 5%. So if we get 1,000 leads, 800 leads, traffic, 1,000 traffic, 800 traffic. How does that go into leads, MQLs, SQLs, opportunities, ultimately to customers? The other thing you want to know here is that ACV. So you go back to the benchmark. We know that in this case, the ACV is $28,000. That's important to say, okay, if I'm spending this amount, how many more deals do I need to get than I currently get with the status quo in order to just pay back what this is? And in this case, it is relatively equal between these two. But there is 3x investment that you have to get. You have to get 3 more deals closed with an in-house writer. And that is ultimately, in this case, why the selection was made to go with the middle option, the more premium outsourced option. So now that you have all of this, you would think that the hard part is done. I don't know about you, but I consistently think that trying to write a very concise email and put all of it together is actually the hardest part. So I do have an email template for you. Everyone's finance leader is named Dave. So we're talking to Dave here. But the biggest things I can recommend is to keep the email as short as possible. Have resources and links like this document that they can go into, but instead of trying to write an email and walk them through this thought process, call out your ask very clearly, have a reason why you selected it, reasons why the other ones may not be as good, have a very clear point of view on what you're asking for, make it very easy for them to understand, and include a timeline of when you need the answer. You can always offer to hop on a call. Sometimes I've even recorded Loom videos going through this. So instead of taking a 30-minute meeting to go through it, I record a 3-minute Loom video and include that. But basically this is kind of this is the answer, and this is showing the work if they want to see it. So that was a lot, and I have 30 seconds before our end of time together. So again, please ask questions, drop in chat, let me know what you guys want to hear. You'll get all of these templates, but just to kind of wrap everything up, having all the data and knowing how to craft it and craft that message is super important. But if you ultimately have the relationship and you're speaking about budgets, profit margins, all of that good stuff fairly consistently, it makes knowing how to craft the actual ask way, way easier. So learn the business metrics, create the benchmarks that you are prepared to have the data at any point in time. And always make sure that when you are asking for something, you're coming with a really clear point of view. So thank you all so much for joining. I have a couple of folks who've dropped some stuff in the chat, so I'm going to look at that. But again, really appreciate it. Hopefully this was a quick but helpful look at kind of how to assemble the tools you need to build the content and different ways that you can present that. For the person who asked if we have any case studies of source revenue from Composely, we do. I can send that to you offline. That's actually a great tee up. I do have a quick poll so that if you are interested in learning about Composely or any of our services, I'll get you to the right person. If you're not, totally fine. Just let us know. Hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar. Elena, though, this is a longer one, so give me a sec. But the org I work for creates lots of collateral. We go to a lot of shows. Been there. We share print collateral digitally, email journeys, social, UTMs. That's a great tool. But tracking is very messy, always. I love when people say, just use a UTM, and then you practically try to do it, and it never quite gives you the level of focus that you want to see. Yes, I very much agree. It really stinks. I was an event manager for 4 years, and I ran into this issue all of the time because we would generate this content at the event, but because you didn't have the tracking right, everyone was like, oh, well, they came in through the website. So obviously this is web, where they were at the event, but they Googled our name and clicked on our ad. So that's ad content. So totally feel your pain here. I think it's really a kind of pain in the butt, but as long as you don't, no index it, a lot of times I would just create multiple versions of content. So partnerships is another great example that I'd use UTM tagging for a lot. If we had a new white paper and we wanted to share that through a partner channel, I would just create a new one for every partner. It is a complete pain in the butt, and I'm sure a digital person would say that that's bad and use the UTM tagging. I just saw that it was not reliable enough. And so that way, you have one specific version of a white paper or a webinar or some sort of content that you're giving to this partner, this partner, this partner, can really track it a lot cleaner. On the event side, there are always a couple of things you can do. Having options for them to raise their hand digitally at the event, using QR codes. We also started adding questions, and there's a really interesting study. I can try and find it, include a link in follow-up, but someone ran like thousands of input study that said, if you add a non-required question of how did you hear about us on your inbound forms, it had no impact to the conversion rate of that form. He also tried it making it required, and it didn't have really any impact on the conversion form either. So the finding was you could technically make that a required field. And that was another way of just internally, we all agreed that if someone tells us they were at an event or they saw us socially or some email really triggered them, we would adjust data to make sure that we had the most accurate view of what was working. That was a long answer, but hopefully that was helpful. Colleen, awesome. Thanks for sharing. All right, I'm going to take a quick look at Q&A. I don't see anything else, and I know we're a few minutes over. So yes, thank you all so much for joining. Like I said, we will be sending all of the templates, the recording, as well as the slide deck in an email over to you by tomorrow. So keep an eye on your inbox. But please feel free to reach out to me if you have any specific questions, or you're kind of working on if you're working on a specific use case and you just want a second set of eyes, please feel free to reach out to me, Nicole at Composely, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Would love to help if I can. But thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.